What's up, my PT peeps? One Eye Bri back to talk about The Walking Dead and do a discussion about Rick and Negan and how they're similar. We crazy? Well, we'll talk about a couple things. Then no, they're not the exact person, and we know they're very different, but we're going to talk about things that make them similar. Spoiler warning if you don't want to know this information about the comics and the show, and here we go. Now, the story of The Walking Dead is Rick Grimes, and he's the main character of there. And then Negan came around in issue 100 of the comic, and now he's in season 7. Well, season 6 ended with Negan being introduced, and now we're in season 7 with Negan being a main character on the show. Now, they're both leaders of their groups, Rick being the survivors and Negan being the saviors, of course. They have very different styles of leading, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but Rick being the leader that he is, I kind of sympathize and would be on Team Rick over Team Negan myself, but Team Negan is a successful group for some point of the show and in the comics. But let's talk about how it started. Rick Grimes in the hospital. Yes, after the gunshot, being there, stuck in the hospital, he wakes up to find the world gone to shit. And very similar way, Negan's story starts in the hospital as well. We follow Rick, but in the comics that just came out of Here's Negan, Negan is not the one in the hospital as the patient. He's in the hospital because of his sick wife who has cancer. So the walkers start, and the zombie apocalypse starts with both characters in the hospital. Negan being there for his dying wife, and Rick being a patient. If you haven't checked out Here's Negan, definitely check it out. A little mini comic series. Now, we all know about Lucille, and Negan's favorite weapon is named after his wife, Lucille. The bat, Lucille, Negan's favorite weapon of choice. But the first weapon that Rick uses is a baseball bat. Yes, I know it's not Lucille, it's not covered in barbed wire, but the first walker that he kills with Morgan at the Morgan house is the baseball bat that he's holding right there. So, yes, it's a small connection, and Rick has to hold Lucille a couple times, but baseball bats connecting the two characters somewhat, you know. It's a little reach, I know, but there is a baseball bat connection with them. Lucille for Negan, with a nice bullet in there with Rosita's shot, which is a little far-fetched to my eyes, but it happened on the show. Lucille. Do you like Lucille? Do you not? When you think Negan, you think Lucille, so they're both connected there. Just like when you think Rick, you think his Colt Python 357 Magnum. Yes, he has a gun. He brought a gun to a bat to a gunfight. Well, we'll see that hopefully on the show. But they both have iconic weapons. When you think Negan, you think Lucille. When you think Rick, you think his Colt Python 357 Magnum. Now, they're both leaders of successful groups. Rick being a little different type of leader than Negan, of course. Negan's more the dictator leader. Rick is more of the democracy, talk about things a little bit, but he also has a little dictatorship in there for it. I just love this picture here of them going at it. Can't wait to see the second part of season 7 into season 8. Now let's talk about the ladies with these two. Now, Negan has some wives. He has a whole harem of wives, and you think, oh, that's terrible on there too. But I guess Negan's just taken in being a dictator. He can do what he wants, and these people abide by his rules, so he's living it up, being with a bunch of different women. Kind of gross, kind of whatever, but in a zombie apocalypse, I guess he can sow his wild oats with Sherry and the rest of his wives. Now, Rick, not the same case by any means, but he's not some Boy Scout either. He was with Lori at the beginning, of course, who was terrible in my eyes. Lori, don't miss Lori, we'll just say that. Rick was with Lori, didn't want to be with anybody else, even though she was with Shane and whatever at the time, thought he was dead. That whole big love triangle that really was tough to watch. But then he was with Jesse, which had a problem with Jesse and Pete and whatever. And yes, they never got together like that. Maybe we just never saw it, you know. But they didn't freaking do nothing. You know, Rick was doing his little thing with Jesse, so he did have a little relationship with her. Then Michonne, well, on the show it's Michonne, in the comics it's Andrea, so you can say two different relationships. But Rick and Michonne, I like them. They're a good relationship, even though that's just, he's a one relationship person. He's not getting with a bunch of women like Negan is. Now let's talk about leadership. I guess leadership strategies. Now they're both leaders, unquestionable leaders, but they have different ways of doing it for sure. Rick being more of the democratic way of talking with everybody and having their input put in. ultimately treating everyone like equals. He does basically do what he wants to do and voices the opinion of other people and maybe changes it. He even had a council back in season 4 with the group that he wasn't even a part of, which shows his openness as a leader. And you have Negan, who rules with an iron fist, who sets up rules that need to be upheld or it all breaks down, which I like the rules idea somewhat, where Negan is basically the dictator of the rules and he makes decisions on what is said, so it's the Negan way or the highway. He does some ruthless things, which kind of had to happen, I guess, with Spencer and with the lineup and everything. So he's not a psychotic person where he just does things randomly just because he feels like it. He does things to survive and set the order. Rick does things to survive just like Negan, but I feel like his acts were always to defend himself and weren't, I don't know, premeditated or over the top, where he just had to take the people out like Joe and Gareth and I guess the governor and a bunch of other people that he had to do it. And I think that it's just different between Negan and Rick, and Negan's just a little over the top, especially with the lineup and everything had to be done. But I know that Negan has to set the tone for the Saviors and the other group, where he's got to have maximum impact to get the point across. Rick is no saint by any means, and Negan's a little over the top with his, gore and violence. But Rick's doing the same thing when he took out the satellite station, the compound, and with all the other acts that he had to do, especially with taking out all those Saviors. And Negan sees it that way. So I can see the team Negan who likes that approach and understands Rick's not the biggest saint, where he's just not done anything to provoke the bear there with the Saviors, like I said. So between the two, we know Negan and Rick aren't the same and whatever. If you're team Negan or team Rick, you're going to be on one side or the other. Like myself, I'm team Rick. But we have some similarities on there too. Hopefully you've seen them on there. Treated with an open mind. Like I said, I'm team Rick. For those team Negan, I don't hate you, just don't take half my shit. So there you go, guys. Like, share, subscribe today to get more videos. You guys are awesome, and let us know what you think of the similarities of Rick and Negan.